Good afternoon. Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. We are live on our YouTube channel. It is Jeremy Werner and Derek Piper, and we got some things to talk about, and some of that is just not a lot happening for Illinois other than some of their players entering the transfer portal. We will give the latest as Illinois had a quiet 2 weeks of additions, but we've seen Luke Goody enter the transfer portal and commit to Indiana. We have seen Nicolo Moretti enter the transfer portal, and he'll have his options open. And now Matt Norlander reports it. Coleman Hawkins confirms it, saying, relax, LOL. But he hands out the statement that we'll go over here in a second. So, Derek, how are you today? Are you better than our board right now?
I wouldn't say I'm relaxed, as Coleman is suggesting. But, yeah, it would be hard to be as frantic and flustered as our message board is right now. We'll see. We are sitting here right on the deadline of the transfer portal window to enter. So, opportunities for guys to go in, and we'll see who all is in by the strike of midnight or whatever you want to call it. And obviously Coleman going in, not a huge surprise, I think, based on some things that we had heard throughout the offseason. As soon as the season was over, I referenced back to Joey Wagner wrote an article and got a quote from Coleman about keeping options open and those type of things. He told us that he was done in an Illinois uniform, or at least that's what he thought. So I'm not sitting here saying that I knew this was coming by any means, but the idea of him making this step isn't like out of the blue or out of left field. So I don't know how much has changed for him. I think his plan is still to stay in the draft and find out enough to where he has a good landing spot there. But if he does get pushed back to college, maybe it is somewhere different than an Illinois uniform.
I hate reading in a podcast, but I feel like I need to, just so his words can be represented here on this podcast. He wrote in a graphic on Twitter, "My intention is 100% to stay in the draft. I'm fully focused on that process. I want to make sure I take every opportunity to protect myself in case of injury or any other unforeseen circumstances down the road. With the recent NCAA rule change regarding grad transfers and the May 1st deadline approaching, entering the portal gives me the best chance to protect myself in those instances and maximize my opportunities as I go through the pre-draft process. I love the University of Illinois, and I am proud to be earning my degree here. I'm forever indebted to Coach Underwood and loved playing for him throughout my college career. This was truly one of the best years of my life, and no matter what the future holds, Illinois will always be home." People can say things about Coleman, whatever they want. This guy is smart. He is really smart, and this is a smart business move for Coleman Hawkins. It ensures, as he says, if there's something that happens during the pre-draft process, one, injury, two, the NBA saying it's not going to draft you, that your options are now open. Kofi Coburn did this a couple years ago. Now, he came back to Illinois before this NIL thing really exploded, mind you. But Coleman Hawkins now is one of the most sought after guys in the transfer portal. And he's going to be one of the most marketable guys in the transfer portal. And if he sticks around long enough, Derek, he might drive up his price even more. This is smart business for Coleman Hawkins. And just my read of it, Derek, I'll let you weigh in here in a second. I think the most likely thing is, I'll take his word for it, they stays in the NBA. The second most likely for me is he's probably playing in another uniform next year rather than Illinois. I think Illinois is a possibility. I think that's the third most likely. Am I wrong? Am I reading that wrong in your opinion?
No, I fully agree with you. That would be how I would read it as well. And I don't necessarily – I think there are multiple layers to it. Not to say that there was some kind of sour ending in Illinois. There wasn't. And obviously he wrote that as far as the type of year that they had. And he appreciates the success that they were able to build at Illinois. And I don't think this makes him – because, of course, he's kind of the poster child for loyalty, right? He's kind of the guy in an era where there's so much player movement and so many – examples where guys don't stay for 4 years. I don't. Some will say that this changes that if you were to like pull out of the draft and play in another uniform. I don't know necessarily that that's the case, but I fully agree. Like you're saying, he is just keeping his options open and maximizing his earning potential, definitely, because I mean, guys are getting paid in the portal right now, especially front court players. And not that Illinois doesn't have money to spend and could potentially make a decision. I know they've really prioritize the wing as probably their biggest area of need, that if Coleman was considering truly coming back, could he be in the mix for a big payday at Illinois? I think that's possible, but I think that both sides, and the way that I know that we've talked about this between us at Inquirer, you, me, and Joey. I feel like both sides are at peace with what's happened through 4 years. I feel like Coleman is very thankful for his time at Illinois, but I think that if he were to come back to college, he's open to the idea of playing elsewhere, especially potentially back on the West Coast, maybe closer to home, or just at a different spot. And same thing with Illinois. Like they're also in a position here where this is different. Where last offseason he could have went through the draft process and then being a grad could have just popped in the portal on June 1st if he wanted to. And so this is forcing his hand to make this kind of preemptive decision just to kind of open the door in case that were to happen. Illinois, on the other hand, probably doesn't want to get caught waiting around for it if they were even very, very interested in bringing him back. So I just think that the way that Illinois has to push forward and try to build their roster, there hasn't been any expectation or a lot of things they're hanging on to as far as, well, if Coleman comes back, we won't add this guy or we'll save this amount of money. That's not going on. And I think from Coleman's standpoint, yes, trying to go to the draft, get picked. We'll see if that happens. If it doesn't, I agree with you. I think option 2 is most likely to be some other uniform.
I think Coleman wants to be playing in the NBA at this time in 5-6 months. The question is, does the NBA think that? He might have to spend some time in the G League, but does he get drafted? It's not a great draft, but the Athletic Jonathan Givony has him top 90, but in the 80s. And the Athletic Sam Vecini, ESPN's Jonathan Givony has him in the late 80s too, among his top 100. So it's just not a certainty. And if it's not a certainty for Coleman Hawkins to get drafted, two-way contract could probably be the best for him. And that's not guaranteed money. This guy can make a ton of money in college. And the question is, as you said, Derek, like, I don't think Illinois is waiting around. Like, I don't think they're doing that with 5 scholarships open and needing to put together a bulk of this roster. I take Coleman at his word after the NCAA tournament that he said, I think this was my last year in an Illinois uniform.
Yeah, I do too.
He's always been honest with us. And I think those words, I think this was the last year in an Illinois uniform. I think those were chosen words by Coleman Hawkins. Maybe I'm reading way too much into it, but he's always been straight with us.
Yeah, no, I asked him, I think it was before the Big Ten tournament, is this your last ride at Illinois? He didn't give me a straight answer there. He kind of like looked around the gym to see who was listening and kind of got the sense that this has been in his mind the last go. And obviously, when he says that, we've never, for all that Coleman has been a lightning rod for conversation, no one's ever said, oh, well, he's one that you can't fully believe what he says, those type of things. He always has kind of really showed you his cards and allowed you to like him or not like him. And that, so I think that when he said that about Illinois, like, he meant it. So I'm not saying that in the right situation, I definitely know he doesn't want to play the 5. So if Illinois was to be a really, on Coleman's end of things, really considered by him as a spot to go back to, they'd have to have a 5-man that he felt comfortable playing with. Obviously, they'd have to be competitive on the NIL side, but maybe it would just be a situation where he'd want a fresh start. I don't know. That would be something that we'd have to really dive into if this draft thing doesn't work out. And I think that's kind of interesting with maybe, if his knee wasn't as big of an issue as it was down the stretch of this season. I don't know how the NBA is evaluating that. I wonder how he'll test at the combine and how much mobility he has back or how he's feeling as far as the percentage. But obviously other things in terms of more consistency, better 3-point shooting, he answered those this year. Like, he stepped up and did those things, which is what the NBA ultimately wanted. It's not considered, as we've discussed at different points, a hugely strong draft, especially at the top. I know obviously he's not going to be in that mix, but maybe this is the best time for him to go on that front. But yeah, I think, like you were saying, I trust what he said. And to what his statement was, I don't know that, the injury part of it, I don't know that, going in the portal protects him a ton, because I don't know who's paying for an injured draft, guy that's leaving the draft. But yeah, I think one thing is that Illinois could fill up its roster, fill up its NIL commitments, and it just allows him to, I think mostly if he doesn't hear what he wants and plan A doesn't work, it expands all of what he can dabble with back in college.
I'm just imagining him playing with Hunter Dickinson at Kansas and thinking of that, or North Carolina. And it's the portal age, man. He gave his 4 years to Illinois. He has a bonus year. I could not blame him personally, though it would be very difficult for Illinois fans to watch him elsewhere. So it'll be interesting to see how the next month goes for him with the draft process. I'm sure he'll be at the draft combine in Chicago in about 3 weeks, along with Terrence Shannon Jr. So we will see how that goes. Marcus Damask, we'll see if he gets invited to the G League after a really good performance at Portsmouth. I haven't brought up that with you on the pod yet here, Derek. Marcus Damask announces that he is out of his college eligibility at the moment. We've not gotten confirmation. The NCAA said he does not, that it is denied, that a waiver is denied, but he is moving on. That is the word. And he is done with college. So obviously that does not seem like a potential return for Illinois either.
Right, and it seemed like it was going to be a hard case for him to prove that he should get a 6th year after playing half a season during the COVID year, which he got back anyway. So I'm with you. I know that we had both shared on our board that it sounds like he's at least heard something back from the NCAA. Is that a flat out no? Is that a denial? Is that after having appealed? We don't have those details. I know that Brad had an interesting comment as far as like he was obtaining a legal counsel and that type of thing. I would assume that would be in terms of an appeal, or possibly we've seen people who don't get appeals and then they sue. So it doesn't seem he's going that way. It seems like he's fully planning and pushing forward with preparing for the professional ranks. And it'd be great if he got a G League combine invite. Matthew Meyer was in the summer league last year. I don't know why Marcus Damask wouldn't get an opportunity like that, especially if he showed well, if he got invited and showed well at the G League combine. So, and really going out on such a high note, I know that we're talking earning potential with Coleman. Like if he had another opportunity to go back to college and what he could command from Illinois to get him back in Champaign and in an orange and blue uniform, I mean, he's like a $500,000+ type of guy if he goes back to school. So I get why he would explore that, but it does seem like, coming off an Elite Eight, first team All Big Ten. I mean, at the very least, it seems like a guy who could play in Europe for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what the future holds for him. But yes, always felt like it'd be tough to get that nod from the NCAA. Now it seems like he's definitely moving forward pretty decisively.
And I get the Illinois fans' reaction to anything the NCAA does not approve for you, but he did not have a good case. It was just not a very good case. Like Alex Palczewski, I don't know how it was much different from there, but it wasn't a great case for Illinois. So the expectation was like, hey, we'll shoot our shot and we'll see if we can here. Niccolo Moretti, again, I don't think him entering the transfer portal is a surprise, Derek, for us, given the role is going to be really in doubt with Dre Gibbs-Allhorn returning, with Kylan Boswell in the mix, Ty Rodgers potentially playing some point guard actually this year. But just your reaction to Moretti doing it, 2 days before the portal entries close here.
Yeah, on its own, not hugely surprising. I think just there is a little bit of the shock value of how many guys are in the portal or how few are coming back. 2 scholarship players from the Elite Eight team in line to return in DGL and Ty. So with Nico, yes, from a role standpoint, I know that the backup point guard isn't really hugely clear right now. Kylan will obviously be the starter. With the next guy in line, would it be Ty? Would it be DGL with some more on-ball development and maybe the game slows down more for him? And Nico had his moments, obviously most notably that Iowa game, and still has 3 years of eligibility. As we've talked about, he has limitations athletically, defensively, and I'm sure that he has in mind not only Kylan coming in and playing huge minutes, but Jeremiah Fears coming in the next year. So we'll see where he ultimately lands. Maybe it's a step down to the mid-major ranks and that type of thing. Obviously, it worked out well. I'm not saying he's going to be the next Brandon Podziemski or anything, but sometimes that could be a route that would just have more of a defined role early on and just better competition for him. So I'm not really surprised by it, no, but I do think from a ball handling standpoint, there is obviously still questions for Illinois to check boxes of who are your capable ball handlers, whether it's natural point guard or not.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give this to Dre Gibbs-Allhorn. He's got a big role he's coming into. I mean, basically any of the scholarship players right now outside of Jason Jackson are sitting there looking at a good role until Illinois adds more. But, Nico does have some enticing offensive upside, especially in the half court, and can break people down and then really push it in the transition. I always question, like, who's he guarding? How can you keep him on the court? Like, who's he going to guard? If he goes down a level, Derek, I think he could be really good. I think he can really succeed there. But with the talent Illinois is adding here, I just don't know, especially after adding Boswell, just what that role would be. But Coleman would be the 6th Illini to enter the transfer portal. We knew they were losing seniors. We knew probably Coleman Hawkins' Illini career was over. But this is a lot, Derek. Like, there's only 2 potential guys returning that we know of, and we'll find out for sure in the next 48 to 72 hours here. In Ty Rodgers, who I think is really important to bring back right now, and Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, who's got a big role. Should Brad Underwood have prioritized keeping some of these guys? I mean, Luke Goody's going to be playing against you for a team that, I'll give Indiana this at this point, they might be the most talented roster in the Big Ten. Them and Michigan right now with how they've kind of loaded up, look like those 2 teams could be 2 of the top teams in the Big Ten. Should he have prioritized retention more?
I think it's a fair question. I don't think it has a clear answer, obviously, right now. If you're doing kind of one-for-one comparisons, who Illinois ends up at the 5 with, we don't know yet in comparison to trying to keep Dane Dainja or what it – and, of course, with each guy, especially someone like Dane, who I think got a nice uptick in NIL money going to Memphis, what would you have had to pay him versus what you could have gotten in the portal otherwise? So that's one thing that I can't really answer quite yet. It was something that you would have had to play Dane more and give him a better role probably through the season to keep him happy. And obviously you can't argue with what Illinois did to get to the point of being in an Elite Eight. Of course, though, Dane in the postseason really turned it on and was a different player down the stretch than he was earlier in the season. So he was part of that success, but some of the struggles there. Luke Goody, if you get Ben Humrickhouse, I think Ben Humrickhouse is a more versatile offensive piece. I think he's more dynamic. We'll see. Obviously, number one, you got to get him. Number two, the transition from the Missouri Valley up a level. It worked out for a handful of guys in the Big Ten last year. Would he have the same type of seamless transition? Luke has proven he can make shots at the Big Ten, but I just feel like Ben Humrickhouse, you could say, is potentially an upgrade or just a more of what you need in a year when you lose Damask, you lose Shannon, if you lose Hawkins. We're talking about not only like star players. I'm not saying that Ben is for sure one of those if he's added at Illinois, but playmakers, like guys that can do multiple things with the ball in their hands. Luke's not really that. He's kind of a specialties, catch and shoot, maybe run off a screen type of thing, and is really good at what he does, and obviously is a very coveted skill for Indiana. That's not something they have a lot of otherwise. But no, I think that and then like Amani is a kind of special case with Chester leaving, and yes, they recruited Kerry Booth, so there was some overlap there. But I think that on the whole, I don't feel like Illinois has misstepped as far as that goes. But we'll see. I think that there is the potential of, with so many new guys, and next year we're talking about, does the chemistry fit? Is there enough leadership? Is there enough of a relationship between the coach and the players where there's like the longer established buy-in? I think that those are things that sometimes happen when you've got more continuity, more guys that have been in your program for a handful of years. That's something Illinois will have to fight against. But it's probably too soon to say right now, although I kind of, if you're going to pick the Tom Izzo full-on continuity versus Brad's, like, I want to upgrade if there's a potential to upgrade, let's embrace some of the madness, I think Brad's more on the right side of it than like let's just dive into continuity.
Yeah, because let's be outside of Coleman, all these guys are role players, right? Not that there's not value in that. And Illinois is going to need a couple more role players to add via the transfer portal here. It's right here. We're turning the page to May, and it's really uncomfortable with only 8 scholarship players and not knowing who the other additions will be. Like, this is a really uncomfortable situation. Illinois will add players. They will add talent. Like, that's going to happen. They will add pieces. It's not going to be an 8 scholarship person team, and Illinois has got some NIL. Is it as much as relative what the other prices are? I mean, I've been sticker shocked by some of the prices we've been hearing for some of these players, and I'm sure that's been the case for Illinois. If you add a Ben Humrickhouse, if you add a center, if you add a good wing, then you start to feel better about, like, yes, this retool can go well. That stuff still has to happen, though. So like the unknown of does Illinois land its top targets right now? Do they land Ben Rickhouse over Villanova and some of these other suitors? That still has to play out. The fact that he got away from campus without announcing a commitment, I know there was a report, but that has not been the case. Like that's a little unnerving. The fact that we don't know of a wing that they are certainly in on after AJ Storr goes elsewhere to Kansas, that's unnerving. Like the fact that they don't have a center like on campus for an official visit, it's a little unnerving. So our pod title here as we do this live pod is there time for concern? I think Brad Underwood's going to have a good roster. Like I think he's going to fill some holes, but I am a little bit like, let's see if this does go as well as they hope, because it doesn't feel like everything yet has gone to plan. Not that it ever does, Derek, in the transfer portal, but they got a lot of work to do. They got 5 scholarships and they at least got to fill, I would imagine, 4 of them.
Right. No, that's all completely fair. I think that they did get off to a good start. You get 2 high major proven starters in Kylan Boswell and Trey White. I like Kerry Booth as a piece in the front court of what he can become.
Can I say the Trey White edition is looming large right now? Like that one looks like, people question, should we push for Marcus Damask right now? Like Trey White is a really good power forward or high major scorer and basketball player that's got upside. I think he could be massive for this offseason now of getting him locked in early.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no doubt. As somebody that maybe can take that next step, being in a better situation. Obviously, I think we're probably talking about him differently if he's 1 year removed, or if he's coming off the USC year versus you go to Louisville and maybe he's less efficient, and that brand of basketball, that record, you're just kind of like, do we really want somebody who was there and maybe part of the problem or whatnot? But anyways, yes, the needs still are very glaring when you think about the wing, when you think about the 5, when you think about shooting, especially without Luke Goody now. So I think come Rickhouse, you do have angst anytime a guy leaves your campus. You thought it was in closing mode and we still haven't heard anything. I do still feel like Illinois makes a ton of sense. I still feel like they're working to close that thing. And Villanova and Louisville are the 2 main known suitors, are really trying to overhaul their rosters as well. 2 places that have a good amount of NIL. I'm sure that Rickhouse is not cheap, so I think that's been part of it as well. We'll have to see. I do think that a decision sometime this week is within the realm of possibility, if not likely, but we'll have to follow up on that and see how that goes. That would be a really nice piece. A guy I think is a starter for you if you get him at the 4 and can do a lot of things offensively. The wing, though, yeah, I get it. Post AJ Storr, that was, again, thought to be maybe you allocate your most NIL dollars. Maybe you make a $750,000 to $1 million expenditure there on the wing and try to, as best as you can, replace Terrence Shannon Jr. or get somewhere where you get that alpha scorer. And right now that we can't point to somebody and say this is the obvious pivot or these are your options right now, it is kind of unsettling. I'm not saying that we won't have names here soon. We'll have a full picture of all of who's available here within the next less than 24 hours or so. So there is that as well. But yeah, the 5, Ugonna Onyenso, who Orlando Antigua has connection to and recruited to Kentucky. There's smoke for him to go to Arkansas, or I should say Alabama. You've seen Arkansas get involved with who do they? No, Cliff Omori at Alabama. Arkansas has gotten a big as well, and they're just Kentucky being able to get Brandon Garrison, somebody that Illinois had a Zoom with from Oklahoma State. So you're seeing some names kind of pop off the board, and I'm not saying it's panic time, but yeah, you're sitting here with some needs that need to be filled. And I think when you see 4, 5 scholarships open, that's when fans get a little antsy.
A Rickhouse commitment would certainly help. And people know how I feel about him. I think he's a great offensive weapon. Like you have him, Trey White, Kylan Boswell, Kerry Booth, Merez Johnson, Ty Rogers. Like you still need a wing. You still need a wing that can score, but all of a sudden you're starting to get really balanced and you're starting to get a lot of guys who can shoot the ball, that you can play around Ty Rogers. I'm starting to like how that would develop. You need a rim runner, big, right, that can rotate with Merez Johnson. And I feel like they're going to find one, but this is where Orlando Antigua needs to go to work, right? Like this is what he does. But it is interesting, Derek, that Brad Underwood over in Europe right now. What do we make of that? What do you know about that?
There are some options, definitely internationally. That's something they're looking into. I think, especially at the 5 spot or just the front court in general. Particularly the 5, because I think if you get the plan to play out as you want, Ben Rickhouse, I think he's a 4 mostly. Kerry Booth, a 4 mostly. We know Merez is coming in as a 5-man, but that's kind of where it's interesting because these international guys are, coming out of high school type of age in most cases. There can be a few exceptions, but usually when you break kind of like the 18-year-old and the 19, that gives them an ability to sign like pro contracts. And then at that point, they've kind of really sacrificed their college eligibility or ability to make that transition. So the idea that we're talking about some younger type of pieces, that is interesting. But yeah, I'd look at the 5 spot, and I think that some skill at the 5 is still something that's desirable for Brad, even though it's kind of that balance of, a rim protector would really be nice, a legit like 7-foot shot blocker, rim runner, kind of that Onyenso type of mold. But also, hey, if we can get some 5 out still and some ability to play pick and pop and those type of things, that's intriguing as well. So I think there's
I'm glad you brought that up there because Merez is kind of that rim runner, and he's gonna play.
Yeah,
like he's definitely gonna play. And if Ty Rodgers is a big part of this team, which I expect him to be, you probably need somebody that can shoot at the 5. You probably need somebody that can stretch the 4.
Yeah, no, it'd be nice. It'd be nice for sure. Now I know that Merez 6'9", maybe he's bordering on 6'10". You could argue that maybe he wouldn't be, obviously in comparison to Ugana Onyenso, is one of the top shot blockers in the country. So I wonder about Merez as kind of that eraser at the rim this year. Now, who he's going to become, I think, as he further gets stronger and just learns how to play at this level and maybe not get in as much foul trouble. It could be nice to have, someone, not that you're going to just, I think Brad's shown he's not trying to just scheme or build to last in the Big Ten. He wants to go on a deep run. So he's not going to be like, oh, well, we got to get somebody to answer Ballo or somebody answer Vlad Golden at Michigan. Now, we did see in the tournament this past year, and it always seems like whatever happens in the previous tournament has always been everybody's goal to go out and covet. So Donovan Clingan and Zach Edey both won't be in college next year, but can you have somebody that can play in the paint, at least to defend at the rim? That's something that I think Illinois has seen and wanted, and their defense certainly lacked with that last year. But yes, I think skill at the 5 is also something that they'll evaluate and best available, whatever makes the most sense and who they can get. So I kind of, to answer your first question, I think they're dabbling with a couple of options on the international scene. And not only at the 5, I think there's another one that's kind of a ball handling wing guard with some size. Not adding names to those quite yet, but we'll get there if we need to.
We know they were going after Kobe Brea, the Dayton transfer, just an absolute flamethrower from beyond the arc. He's got all blue bloods coming after him. I'm like looking at names that are actually in the portal. So I know people are wondering, is there a mystery wing? Like when somebody enters the portal that we know Illinois is interested, we could talk about that. But like, I know TJ Bamba has a top 5. They were interested in him before. And like, he would be a guy that I'm looking at in our portal at 247sports.com. I'm like, that guy would make sense. Maybe not the superstar, Derek, but somebody who could fit the wing need, especially if they can add somebody like Ben Rickhouse. Like, I would question who's the go-to player on that team, but I feel like you'd have a really balanced somebody like that. If you can get even somebody like that, I think that'd be a huge addition if you can add Rickhouse to that, along with Trey White and Kylan Boswell and Kerry Booth.
Yeah, I've been doing the same thing, same exercise, going to the portal list, looking at wings. And Bamba, I know that has already started taking some visits, and I know that Kentucky's involved, Memphis, I think Oregon as well. I know that see a poster here, share that too. So could Illinois dive in late? Potentially, because I still think that they could throw a lot of money at a wing and a lot of opportunity and something that would be really attractive. So I wouldn't put it past them to maybe backtrack and jump in on a recruitment that's already starting to progress some. So Bamba is a familiar name.
Yeah, and I'm not even like saying just like somebody like that. Like it could be a really, especially if it's like a 5th-year guy that could be appealing. And I do think Illinois would have enough cachet to get into a recruitment a little bit later and really intrigue a guy.
For sure. Yeah, I think Jalen Wells is another one. Talking about, Bamba came from Washington State last year, then went to Nova. Jalen Wells from Washington State this past year, declared for the NBA draft. 6'8" shooter, wing that is going to command probably again a big NIL bag, some big suitors. He's thought to be one of the top 10 players in the portal right now. So we'll see where that is going to go. But I think that's another one that Illinois could pivot to if they wanted to. As we've talked about, and maybe there will be a couple more names to throw into the mix here in a day or two from now. Whoever's going to, like Coleman, enter the portal at the very, very last moment. But yeah, I think that someone like Wells, someone like Bamba, if they can get in on that one late, that would make sense. And I still think that, and I think the staff would tell you too, they really feel like a wing that can be an alpha scorer and can really come in, and it doesn't have to be, Terrence Shannon level, because you're not going to find that. You're not going to find an All-American, or even may not be as good as AJ Storr, but I still feel like that's a priority, and there will be some options left. But yes, time is of the essence, and some things have sorted out.
All right, let's get to some of these questions before we get out of here. You can send the super chat, send questions. We'll get to some of these before we get out of here. We appreciate the almost 400 people on a Tuesday afternoon with us here on live YouTube here. Steve says, I have no concerns. Underwood is a JUCO coach, and putting a team together with what you have is right in his wheelhouse. You guys keep talking about how he adapts, and he has had to do that his whole career. I'm not at the freak out level. Like, I do understand why people are unsettled, unnerved right now, because we got a lot of questions, and Illinois got a lot of spots they have to fill, and they have a lot of production. I mean, 90% of their scoring is gone. And it might be more than that now. Like, even with Moretti, it goes up a couple percentages. So I trust Brad Underwood that he's going to get talent. Like, for me, this is all relative, right? Like, I'm looking at where they're at right now, Derek, and it's hard for me to imagine a Big Ten title or national championship contention. But what I do find intriguing is that Brad is kind of building for multiple years here, and I kind of like that, because I don't think you want to do this every year. You don't want to replace 10 guys every year, because the risk rate of that is really high. We saw it with Arkansas and several other teams last year. But if you could have Trey White and Kylan Boswell for multiple years, Kerry Booth for multiple years, now you got to add some pieces that could score and help you make the NCAA tournament and help you contend in the Big Ten. But I do like that this roster, all of it can return next year at this point, the 8 guys they have, so you can build something for a couple years here rather than be a one and done. But they're going to add some seniors here because they need some leaders and they need some proven guys.
Yeah, I'd fully expect that. But I do like you said, the potential to make this kind of a 2-year window, and maybe try to, obviously have the success this year that gets you to the tournament, have a chance to make a run. That will always be a goal for Brad Underwood. But in any given season, there will never be, I think, especially in the portal, the idea of it's a rebuild, it's a sacrifice a year for building for a longer term year, because there is the risk of, even though you got some of these guys that they're either going to have enough success to move on and go pro, or they're going to maybe even consider the portal again. That can be on the table because of the multi-year transfer rules. But I think that we've talked about it before. Merez as a sophomore, the ability to bring in Jeremiah Fears in the mix. And if Kylan is kind of a 2-year to really get where he wants to go, that's all pretty exciting. So, but in the immediate sense, they're definitely going to want to still be a tournament team, still make a run, and see where this thing can shake out. And they've got some NIL money to dabble with. They got opportunity to sell. I think also another thing that comes to mind is really just the idea that, I don't know, we still probably be having some of the same conversations, even if some of these guys that could have returned stayed. Like, I think that, if you had Luke Goody, if you had, not to knock Luke or Luke and Moretti, and even if you had Dane, like, I know that it'd be more of a backbone, more of a foundation. But we're talking about role guys, and I think you do need to make some bigger splashes. But of course, you got to make those, otherwise we're talking about some missed opportunities and whatnot. So it is going to be
huge
uncharted territory. This many new pieces, and obviously didn't work as they wanted to in 22-23 with a lot of newcomers, but it is a lot more common now across college basketball, just so much movement.
The Big Ten, man, I need a media guide. for who's
Yeah.
on what roster. Like it is unbelievable the change that is happening. Like I can't even think of like trying to rank teams right now just because the rosters are so different. Cubs fan says, in my opinion, it is inexcusable to have a down year following an Elite Eight with the amount of resources we invest in this staff and the coach and NIL. I don't know what a down year would be. Missing the tournament. Is that what a down year is? I still think they're going to have the talent to make a tournament. Now, as I said, there is risk in this much roster change, but I do think they're kind of going a multi-year thing here. And again, they don't have Kansas, Kentucky, Arkansas NIL. I think we're finding that out a little bit. Indiana is insane right now. It seems like Michigan has stepped up their game as well. So that is really important when you're out on the trail. And I don't think Illinois is hurting. I think they're one of the best in the Big Ten with NIL, but across the country, like there is legit competition. Like the prices it's a good time to be a college basketball player. It's all I'll say.
Yeah, no, you're right. I do think there is a difference. There's a difference between the elite tier and probably the one that the Illinois is in right now, NIL wise, because it does sound like they're trying to be smart with their spending and have said no on some fronts where they could have uh, pushed maybe what they felt like was a good value on somebody because they wanted to save enough money for a different venture. I don't think that Kansas, obviously, what they're going after and the amount of guys they've been able to command. I mean, Store plus a handful of others.
I was just thinking of this. Like, this is a good way to think about this. You're wearing your Cardinals hat. Are the Illini in the Cardinals level of spending while the Kentucky's, the Kansases, the Arkansas, that's more UConn probably. That's more the Yankees, Red Sox level, right?
Yeah.
I feel like Illinois is kind of that Cardinals. We can go get some guys. We got to be kind of smart with our money here. Like we can't just be spending $200 million contracts.
I agree with that. Yeah, I would maybe even for the Cubs fan out there, maybe give them the Cubs. That way we don't have to attach John Mozeliak to Illinois and make him worry about, saying don't worry, we've got starting pitching and we'll get Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson. Because I don't know if I'd put that on.
So you're saying Illinois can get Dansby Swansons?
Yeah. Dansby Swanson's, Shota Imanaga. Like they've done some good things for sure. But yeah, I think it is a little bit more of the upper middle tier for Illinois as it is right now. There's some out there, I think Kentucky, Arkansas, Kansas probably double of what Illinois has. I think Indiana's got at least $1 million, $1.5 million, maybe even $2 million more, depending on what numbers you're running with as far as what each side has to work with. But it's a substantial amount more based on what has been said as far as that goes. So that's a difference. Or maybe a side like Indiana or a side like Kentucky, Kansas can just say, yeah, we like this player. We're just going to throw the money at him and move on. Illinois might have to be a little bit more smart with their spending. And I think that we have seen some of that too.
Illini fan says, do we have any confidence Brad won't push half his team in the portal next year? Guys like Hawkins, Goody, Dane portaling makes me think half this class will portal. I don't think he's going to want to do 10 again. I mean, part of this is you had 6 seniors, right? Like that's part of why you're having all of this, but then he went and tried to upgrade. Like Brad's going to go upgrade if he feels he can upgrade. But I do think with guys having multiple years of eligibility, I don't think that's the plan is to have 10 open spots again next year, but you never know in this day and age.
No, you never know. I would kind of want to bring up how many guys have gotten pushed in the portal. I think that's a interesting kind of question. I think with someone like Moretti, obviously, if you didn't get Kyle, you don't want to be in a situation where you're starting Moretti at point guard. I'm not saying that was the differentiator between he's going to the portal or not, but like Luke Goody, I think wanted to have a bigger role. I think he wants to, although he landed in Indiana where there's traffic in front of him. So I think maybe just Indiana, of course, unique tie because his parents went there and his brother goes there and they needed shooting as much as anything, especially now. So there might have been some of that. And Illinois was continually being active at recruiting wings. And Rickhouse is probably very much in direct competition to what he would be able to bring. So I don't think they said, like, Luke, we don't see a role for you here. You need to go in the portal. Same thing for, like, Amani. I know that to not be the case. And Dane, same thing. So I think that some of these are just maybe honest conversations where it's like, this is our role that we view for you, and guys want more. Guys might want more NIL opportunities as well, and or maybe they just see the writing on the wall of the staff going out and trying to upgrade at their spot, which I think that's probably the most common thing. But no, I wouldn't expect it, because next year, I think maybe part of the smart part of this with Brad, and we could be having this conversation a year from now or 2 years from now, with no COVID year guys next year, it might be a good time to load up on multi-year guys to not have to go in and get a bunch, 7, 8, 9 type of guys next year versus this year. There are just more options this season.
This is a great question by ILL. Of the guys we have right now, who do you predict will be the leading scorer? Boswell? Trey White?
Yeah, that's a good question, man.
It's White or Boswell.
Yeah, right.
Like you could go with the Dre Gibbs Allhorn sophomore leap. I don't know if I'm quite there. Ty Rodgers think will score more. I think he's going to have more opportunities, like be the guy who bullies his way to the basket, maybe runs a little bit of booty ball. I just think Trey White's going to, out of the guys right now, Trey White's going to get a lot of usage, and Kylan Boswell is going to get a lot of usage.
Yeah, as of that right now, it might need to be Trey White, especially for the wing standpoint. Think about more of Kylan being in a ball in the hand, table setter type of mode. Of course, good shooter, really good shooter, and that's something that Trey hasn't done so far, and that is one of the knocks on his game. But yeah, I think that those are the obvious candidates. I wouldn't put anybody else even really in the conversation for that. And yeah, maybe Trey's the right pick. Although I think Kylan's going to have a really good year too.
Cubs fan again. Do you think Illinois will field the tournament caliber team ultimately? Right now, I think this is a mid to bottom tier NIT team. Probably because they only have 8 players. They're going to add more players. Brad Underwood gets NCAA tournament team, so I do think there's risk. There's more downside potentially to this roster, maybe more like 2 years ago. We got to see how it all fits. We got to see what else they add, but just with the NIL resources they have, with what Brad Underwood has done, with the pieces they have in place right now, the pieces they're going to be in the mix for, yeah, I think they'll be a tournament team.
I agree with that. I think that if they were to get Benham Rickhouse and then be able to land, even if it's not an AJ Storr caliber wing, but just a starter that can come in and average anywhere 12, 15 a game. I know that's not necessarily a small ask, but I think it's to be a real factor as a scorer, maybe your primary option, secondary option type of guy. Like, to me, that's probably a tournament team. You're not going to have the same amount of depth as you did, at least as it stands right now, last year. But I do expect this to be a tournament team when it is all said and done, just based on the sell they have, based on still some NIL, based on still time to get some of these answers. And if we were doing this pod, 2 years ago, they hadn't gotten Shannon, they hadn't gotten Meyer. Even last year, I think they had Damask and Quincy on the front end, but I know they were still waiting. Of course, they had to get Coleman and Shannon to come back. I know those were different circumstances than going and pursuing an entirely different new
Should Illini fans be more confident that they're going to get a good bounce here in May? Because that has happened the last couple of years. You've gotten good bounces in May with Terrence and Matthew Meyer, and then, of course, Terrence and Coleman coming back last year. So come on, May's almost here. May's bright.
I was kind of getting at. Maybe the May bounce is coming potentially. I think it could.
Illinois fan, what do you think of DJL's role next year? What does he need to take? What steps does he need to take?
I think the game to slow down offensively. I think that at times just playing too fast, forcing some of the issue with his shots, and I do feel like he's still viewed as probably more of a scoring combo than he is ball in the hand, ideal running the one for Illinois. But I think he'll get opportunities. He'll get opportunities to show what he can do with the ball in his hands, see if he can make reads, because that was something that coming out of high school. They thought that in ball screens he could do more of seeing the floor than like a Jaden Epps. Felt like Jaden kind of had a little bit more tunnel vision and didn't necessarily see things develop or process the way that Dre could. But and then defensively, play with the same kind of energy and dog to you. Do get stronger, obviously. That's always a good thing for a young player. But don't foul as much. Be able to be as pesky and into guys' shirts, but just don't use your hands as much, and just kind of know what gets called and what doesn't as you progress as a college player. And again, strength will help you as well, as you kind of really battle those type of wars. So I think at the very least, he can be a good energy player that can score. And I expect him to be a pretty good defender pushing forward. He showed me signs that he can. I don't know if he's going to be Sincere Harris at that end in terms of just being a game wrecker, but I do think he's one of those change the energy of a game potentially with how he can defend.
He's taken the Justin Harmon role. He's less proven than Justin, but there's a higher ceiling there. Even as a sophomore, because of his athleticism, his burst. I think he already showed more defensively than Harmon, and I thought he had more confidence than Harmon late last season, which is why he was stealing some of his playing time. It's just some of the feel stuff, right? Some of the experience stuff that is his next step. Last one, Derek, as we get out here. Ryan, do we see the portal actually slowing down with the COVID guys gone next year? This is kind of the big question, right? Is this just what it is now? We'll see if there's any massive changes. Like, I feel like it's going to have to be players get paid directly from the school. They enter agreements where they have to stay someplace 2 years or something like that. But barring something different, I don't see the genie going back in the bottle, the toothpaste going back in the tube. Like, I still feel like there's going to be a ton of player movement. There's just going to be less players available because there's less 5th, 6-year guys.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it will. The ultimate line, no, I don't think it's going to slow down a ton. Like, I think that you're still going to have a lot of player movement, and even I think it could even incentivize guys who aren't COVID players, COVID year players to go in the portal, because the dollar figures are always going to be there. So you might just up what that next level, maybe the tier B might be getting paid like tier A guys next year. And there would, there's kind of been portal inflation in terms of NIL prices already this offseason. So maybe that's still going to be prevalent next year. So I don't know. I think that it's a fair question, because there will just be a lower number on the whole because of there's just less of the smaller pool of guys that can go in the portal. But and maybe because of that, you have I know that I forgot who did this exercise. I think it might have been Kevin Sweeney, who used the Evan Maya rankings for portal and saw COVID year players were maybe half of the top 20 currently projected guys in the transfer portal. So it will maybe dilute some of the instant impact, the for sure stud additions. So maybe you don't want to be in a circumstance where you're completely rebuilding and retooling your roster as maybe you can do this past year, the year before that. But on the whole, no, I think the portal will continue to be king in college basketball until there is, like you said, some kind of fundamental change.
Yeah, and I think that fundamental change has to be employee, right? Like, they have to be employees paid by the athletic department, the university, whatever it is. And that comes with so many legal things that we'll talk to Josh Whitman about that, I'm sure, in June. But I do think for the next couple of years, this is what it's going to be. And the players had no power about 10 years ago, Derek. And now the players seem to have all the power. So it's flipped in their direction. I'm happy for them. But I do think universities are going to want some kind of, contract here of like, hey, we're locked into a deal. Like, when you sign a deal, that's your deal. With football, like, you can see somebody transfer somewhere in January and then have a nice spring and just go right back into the portal and get more NIL. Like, that doesn't seem fair, like fundamentally fair, but that's the market we are right now. It's just absolutely open for these players with unlimited transfers, right?
Yeah, it's wild. And I don't love it. I know that obviously the coaches definitely do not love it. You wish could be some middle ground here with more guardrails, more structure, more things that kind of make sense when you've gone beyond what it even is in free agency. Obviously in the pro side, there has to be some give and take to make this thing fully make sense, and not to. I don't know. I don't know how much you can put back into it. Like you said, put the genie back in the bottle, those type of things. The multi-year or the multi-transfer thing, I don't think that's going to change. I think that probably is going to remain there, but maybe it is now. Yeah, like you said, employees make it a contract agreement, and then you're talking about 2-year deals, and there could be more incentives to sign a longer-term contract. So, or
maybe the top guys can do the LeBron thing and sign 1-year deals, right? Like, it depends on your leverage. So I don't know how that will go. Where's the cutoff of that? But that'll all be interesting as we move forward of how we're thinking of college athletics as pro now. It certainly is at football and basketball at the very least. Derek Piper, you are the goods. Thank you as always, man, for the insight.
Yeah, man. We'll be here through May. I don't know when the sleeping time is. It's not here yet, but
Got a vacation planned yet?
No, I've been talking with the wife about that, but not putting in anything in writing until there are less than 5 spots available on Illinois' roster. I'll wait until then.
All right, that sounds good. Hey, we appreciate everybody for joining us. More than 400 people on the live YouTube. Hit that like button on the way out. Subscribe to us. Hit the notifications bell. We appreciate you. If you're listening on the podcast, give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.